I'm really enjoying this video that John Hames put together. I have to reference John's here. This video, and it's more artistic than we've been doing, but I love it because it's ethereal in its definition of miracle. Said from the first week that miracle is kind of technically defined as anything that is impossible or improbable according to the laws of nature, the laws of physics, that just doesn't make sense and really could not happen. But in this video, we see just kind of the artistry of what God does, and especially in these miracle stories of John, the artistry and kind of the ethereal nature of things that seem impossible, or maybe just improbable, or maybe they're just things that bring us awe. And I want to widen our definition today of a miracle, because most of the time when I hear people say that was a miracle, they're not talking about something that was impossible or improbable. They're simply talking about something that was awe-inspiring. And I'll give you a reference. As I was coming from my reserved parking lot in the very far back corner of the parking lot back there, I was walking in, and there was a sunrise coming over the church, our definition of a steeple back here, the roof overlooking, and it was just this beautiful sunrise around 7:25 in the morning or so, and I just was awed. I mean, I was floored. I stopped, and granted, I'm a little in my feelings right now, but it was just like, it was just overcome me. And as I kept walking and appreciating this sunrise, I thought, this literally happens every day. It's part of the way the world works, but at the same time, it was something that stopped me and it gave me pause, and it captured my attention. It helped me see something a little bit larger than I think what I was thinking about at the moment. And I think this is a great definition of miracles that maybe we should lean into. Now, I'll tell you a story about when I was a youth minister. I was working in Topeka, Kansas, with a church of about 1,000 members. It was a larger church, but it was a very blue-collar working environment. So the white-collar people literally could have moved anywhere, and they chose to live in Topeka, Kansas. So it was mostly blue-collar people who were in this church, and being that blue-collar environment, they didn't necessarily travel as far or as often as many of us enjoy the luxuries of doing so. So when I got the opportunity, I led one summer of mission trips there. I wasn't there very long, and they said, okay, well, as you're planning out the middle school trip, remember, we have this policy that we don't go farther than an hour away from the church. I said, great, we're going to go to Minnesota. Randomly picked Minnesota. I don't know why to this day. It turned out to be a great trip, but as I planned that trip, and I thought, wow, we're going as far north as we can on I-35. The senior high trip, we should go as far south as we can go on I-35. So we went down 35. We ended up in Lake Charles, Louisiana, because there was Hurricane Rita relief still going on. And so we went down I-35 and we cut over and made it to Lake Charles. And along the way, it's 16 youth and 2 adults. We're chatting with the students. We're all having fun. They're loud and proud the entire time that we're driving down here. And of course, when we get to Texas, they're asking me all these questions. As we're driving through Dallas, I get to point out all these things that I grew up with. And as we get closer, I start to recognize that at least 14 of these 16 kids have not traveled anywhere outside of the states adjoining Kansas. So they've been skiing in Colorado, they've been in Nebraska to visit family, they've been in Missouri for Branson, they've maybe been down to Oklahoma, but honestly, who goes there? So it was kind of one of those things of they really hadn't been very far out until we got to Louisiana, and one of them said, "Are we near the ocean?" And 14 of these 16 kids had never seen the ocean. And for those of us who have been a little bit more blessed to travel around, have a little bit more maybe resource and disposable income, we know that when you say you're going to the beach and you're going to the ocean, what you really mean is you're going to Destin, you're going to Gulf Shores, you're going to Seaside, you're going to somewhere in Florida, you're going to the Grand Cayman, you're going to Jamaica, you're going to something that actually looks like a beach, and you're not going to Lake Charles. You're not going to Galveston. Maybe you are. And so we get down there and I say, yeah, we're pretty close to the ocean. They're like, and their eyes just kind of like, wow. Gosh. So I made an executive decision. We were supposed to meet our church partners at First United Methodist Church of Lake Charles, and instead I saw a sign that said beach access this way. So I took a hard right in a big 26-passenger seat bus that we weren't supposed to take a hard right in, and we got to the beach, and all the kids just said, hey, let's take a break and let's go see it. And so all of these students just rushed out, and the 14 who had never seen the ocean before just stopped. And they just looked at the enormity of the Gulf of Mexico and how beautiful this was and how it was just super, it just never ended. You couldn't see the other side. It was something that just captured their imagination, made them just freeze for a moment. And it was beautiful to watch. It was beautiful to watch as 6 of them decided to just, in full clothes, rush into the ocean because they'd never been there before and just go completely soak themselves in it. Because I know, like, when you see something like that, I know people talk about feeling small next to the ocean. I think there is a part of that enormity that makes us feel humble and makes us feel small. But in that smallness, we feel connected to something larger than ourselves and feel something, there's a bigger world out there that inspires us. And when we become larger but also bigger because of that, or when we become small but also bigger because of that smallness, we also tend to share that experience. We tend to use that experience. So I have been taking these students on various mission projects around Topeka, and honestly, they developed quite a bit of an attitude about a lot of these mission projects. But I'll tell you, that week in Lake Charles was the greatest mission week of our student ministry. And I accredit it to the fact that they had seen the ocean. And they had seen something just a little bit more grandiose than they could have ever imagined with their own eyes. They saw something that was larger than themselves. They saw something that gave them awe and wonder. And they just could not wait to share that same feeling with those people we were working with. There's something about being invited into a larger space where everybody just kind of jives together and gels together and experiences something amazing together. Of course, I'm talking about in February when my family went to the Taylor Swift concert over in Arlington. We went, and for those of you who know my family, especially if you know my youngest daughter, Kyler, you know that there's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like eating, sleeping, food, shelter, and everything, and the baseline right before all the things you need to survive is Taylor Swift music. So you think that she was super excited, but at the time she was not as Swifty as she is now. She appreciated the music, our whole family appreciated the music, but we go in and it was this amazing experience. And whether you like her or not, it was this like 88,000 people or something in AT&T Stadium all coming together with flashing lights and costumes and friendship bracelets and all singing at the same time. And it was this, you could watch the conversion experience with Kyler just as these two young women in front of us just made sure that she was peppered with friendship bracelets and inviting her into something that was not just we are going to see a concert, but we are part of a movement, if you will, of this incredible experience that has literally transformed her. But just this awe-inspiring moment of getting caught up in something larger, and getting caught up in something larger makes you feel smaller and humble, but also inspires you to share that larger experience with all those who are around you. And music has a way of doing this, especially. Music is this visceral sound. We can describe it with mathematics and science, but it's not until you hear it and you experience it that it becomes more alive and it means something to you. And it really, so there was a guy who was a musician on the side. He was a marine geologist in Sassana, Italy, which you've got Milan, you've got Rome. Sassana's on the coast over on the eastern side of Italy. It's about 97,000 people. It's not a small town, but it's certainly not Rome, and it's certainly not Milan. And he had a dream. His name was Fabio Zagaretti. His dream was that the Foo Fighters, the rock band the Foo Fighters, would come play a show in Sassana, Italy. Now, the Foo Fighters are one of my favorite bands. I love their music. And he had this dream. So what he started doing, instead of just dreaming in his own dream, was he started recruiting other musicians from the town to say, hey, what if we did this really cool thing where we videoed ourselves all playing Learn to Fly by the Foo Fighters, and we put it online, and the Foo Fighters can't ignore us. So he started out with like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, and he said, you know what if we got 100 musicians to come and play? This thing would be epic and amazing. And by the time the networking was done, 1,000 musicians, drummers, bass, guitar, singers, all sorts of, a conductor, all came to this one field near Sassana, Italy, and they played Learn to Fly. And if you want a spiritual experience, go on YouTube and look up Rockin' 1000 Learn to Fly, because it's a phenomenal musical experience, but it's a spiritual moment of 1,000 people all coming together on the same page because one person had a dream and invited somebody else into it. And that dream created this awe-inspiring moment where the Foo Fighters did end up seeing this video and did fly to Sassana, Italy, and did play a concert just for the town, which is not a town that they would have normally gone to. But amazing things happen, miraculous things happen when we realize the awe, the moments of inspiration are not simply for just us. But when we invite other people into those moments of awe, when we capture those moments of awe, when we can share those moments of awe, when we let the awe and the inspiration, the joy, the miraculous flow out of us into others so that they too can be a part of something great. And it seems the more people we invite into something great, the more grandiose and miraculous it seems to become. This is what Jesus was doing in the second miracle story in John. It is a story in which Jesus has been in Cana. He turned the water into wine, which is one of those like the best is yet to come kind of moments. But then he came, this is from John chapter 4, he said, then he came again to Cana in Galilee where he had changed the water into wine. Now there was a royal official whose son lay ill in Capernaum. When he heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went and begged him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Then Jesus said to him, unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. The official said to him, Sir, come down before my little boy dies. Jesus said to him, Go, your son will live. The man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and started on his way. And as he was going down, his slaves met him and told him that his child was alive. So he asked them the hour when he began to recover, and they said to him, Yesterday at 1 p.m, the fever left him. The father realized that this was the hour when Jesus had said to him, Your son will live. So he himself believed, along with his whole household. Now this was the second sign that Jesus did after coming from Judea to Galilee. And one of the things you may notice in this story is, if you read it in Matthew and Luke, it's a little different. In this, it's a court official, so we assume from the court of Herod, who is also not a fan of Jesus. But in Matthew and Luke, it's a Roman centurion, and the Romans are also not a fan of Jesus. So we've got people who are asking miracles of Jesus and healing of Jesus who are not big fans of Jesus, but are starting to come around and are starting to break and blur the lines of who is accepted and welcome into Jesus' movement. Right before this, in John chapter 4, we see a woman who's a Samaritan who is also not a big fan of Jesus or welcome in the Jewish movement, but she breaks through the wall, and Jesus breaks through the wall for her to make her, she's essentially the first person to ever go spread the good news of Jesus. And she was never supposed to meet him in the first place. But she is amazed by the wisdom of what he knows about her. She's amazed by the sign and the miracle, even just of her asking him for a drink of water in this very everyday encounter that turns what is supposed to happen by the laws of society and nature on its head in terms of what can happen when we start to live by the grace and peace and the laws of the kingdom of God that say, I don't care if you're a Samaritan, you're in, and I want you to go and tell the good news to other people so that we can spread the good news to even more people than that. And so after this moment of topsy-turvy breaking the norm, here we have a Roman centurion or a court official, neither one who should be talking to Jesus, neither one who Jesus should like, and yet Jesus heals the son. But he doesn't just heal the son. This isn't just I'm doing a favor for you. He heals the son 18 miles away. He's in Cana. The kid's in Capernaum. And what we see here is that Jesus' miracles have no boundaries. What we see here is the thought process of what Jesus can control. The thought process of what Jesus is looking at is not isolated to one event. It's not isolated to one person. Remember, the miracles in John are not about the person being healed. They're about how Jesus is thinking about the miracles. And Jesus says, I don't care if you're here. I don't care if you're there. But my healing is for everybody across the spectrum. And because of this great sign, because of this great wonder, we see this progression of faith sharing. We see the man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and started on his way. He's got his individual faith, but he goes back and helps these servants recognize the miracle, the awe that he's experienced, so he himself believed along with his household. And do we really think that the faith sharing stopped there? How many of those servants went and told their friends? How many more people did the household go share? This is a miraculous sign that I have seen, and I need to tell you something about that. And what is amazing is that when we look at the history of Christianity and we look at the spread of Christianity before it became kind of state-sponsored and it was just this movement from the grassroots level, you can look at the millions of people who accepted Christ as their Lord and Savior, and you look at the very small percentage of those who ever saw a miracle in their own eyes. The majority of people who accepted Christ, and I would say to this day, have accepted Christ based on the testimony of somebody else's awe experience. Something else that they didn't experience, and yet somebody told them their story. Somebody invited them into an inspirational moment that they wanted to share that has changed them and has transformed them. And Jesus said, this is one of the most curious things. I've wrestled with this statement all week long. Jesus said, unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. And I've found this to be true. Obviously, Jesus knows what he's talking about. I found let me just ask a question without you raising your hands. How many of you ever had a family member or a good friend who has really been struggling or suffering, and you have been on your knees praying for a miracle, and you didn't get it? And how do you feel? Do you feel abandoned? Do you feel lost? Do you say, this guy got his son healed from 18 miles away and you don't have time to come see me? Jesus knew there was going to have to be signs and wonders, but it wasn't a campaign of, I'm going to walk around healing everybody all the time. It was, you won't believe unless there is a sign and wonder. There is something odd, something improbable, something that expands your viewpoint of how the world works, something that is so grandiose that you might feel small within that, but empowered by how big it is and how you can be a part of that. It may not always look like a direct healing, and it may not always look like a direct miracle. Sometimes a sign or a wonder is simply somebody who does something incredibly unexpected, incredibly impactful, and incredibly small, so that somebody else can see their own potential and the beauty of this world. I want to introduce you to a woman named Lynn Partain. Several of you know her. You're going to hear from Lynn about a program that we do called Harper's Helpers.
Enough to be the leader of one of our core missions, which is Harper's Helpers. Harper is a low-income Title I school in Princeton. In John 13, 14, and 15, the Bible verses say that we are to be the hands and feet of God. Jesus was washing his disciples' feet at the time, and this is teaching us that we do need to be servants to others. Because of Creekwood, we have been able to do a lot of things for Harper. In August, the backpack drive allowed us to give over 55 backpacks filled with school supplies for children that were not able to have it. We were also able to prepare 50 personal hygiene packages for the girls out at the school. We go out and we help the teachers. We've also helped decorate for events that they've had. In November, we were able to do 25 Thanksgiving dinner bags. At Christmas, we gave each grade level teacher an Amazon card to buy supplies. Therefore, they didn't have to buy it out of their own pockets. And in May, we'll be giving them a teacher appreciation luncheon. Everybody loves the snack cart. They get excited when they see it coming down the hall moment, but it also allows us to remind them that Creekwood loves them and that we will always support them and that we appreciate what they do. Every year, the fifth graders, they're the oldest ones there in the school, have the privilege of writing a story, illustrating it, and then we publish it for them. The kids are given the opportunity to buy the books, but it's sad because this year there are quite a few whose parents are not going to be able to afford it, and it breaks my heart. And I kind of dread the day that I give these out because those children will not receive books. And I thought to myself, you know what, this is what Creekwood does. This is what Harper's Helpers is. This is what it means to be the hands and feet of God. I said, well, let me see what I can do about it. And a week later, I took him out a check, and she could not believe that we care that much about them. They got all the kids together and presented this book to Creekwood. This is the book that the fifth graders last year wrote. They illustrated it, and they were so proud of it, and it made me realize what a great church we have, that we do care. Being a Harper Helper has opened my eyes to God's world and how it takes so little to show love and appreciation to those and to share God's love.
So in the story, we see Jesus who does something miraculous for one person, and then it ends up spreading and spreading and spreading. Not multiple miracles, but one sign, one moment, one thing that expands outward. And here we have a school that we have been working with. I looked online. I was hoping it was 18 miles away just for congruency with the scripture. It's only 6 miles away, but if you go 3 times, it'll be perfect. 6 miles away that we've been involved in. And we're going to be transitioning from Harper next school year into more McKinney ISD, Fabian Middle School, Partners in Education there. We'll be a little bit closer to home, but here we have this miracle that exists outside of this place. To know that the work and the miracle of Christ that can happen through us doesn't have to be here, but it is in fact out there, and it is away from the campus where the need is, where the sick child lays, where the person needs a little bit of inspiration. And in a Title I school, and a lot of this miracle is showing the entirety of not just what happened, but what could be. The signs and wonders that Jesus says we need to believe, we need to know what could be. It's not always going to happen, but what could be. The faith that we have, what could be. The hope that we have, what could be. And hope is a powerful thing, and faith is a powerful thing. In fact, it leads to more miracles than straight up miracles. When we have hope, it gives us drive, because in the humility of God on our side, we know that we can do larger things than we simply could out of our own imagination. And so by being involved in Harper, we have fifth graders who never imagined they could publish a book, and they published a book. We have teachers who, let's just say, teachers don't always feel the love from a macro level and a micro level, and yet they go and realize that, you know what, a snack cart could come around today, and someone's going to love me, and someone's going to know me, and Lynn Partain knows every single one of those teachers and prays for them by name, and they give her prayer requests when she goes there. And these students who didn't realize that they could buy a book at the book fair now all of a sudden have this potential of, well, I could buy a book at the book fair. And where it all meets the road is we used to do a mentoring at Harper. We're going to do mentoring one-on-one. I know Reed Dolly and Amber Craver have already done the training for this with McKinney ISD, but the mentoring, the one-on-one, is where the rubber meets the road of helping people see what can be. And that's often the miracle that exists within these kind of partnerships that we have, is not necessarily the work that we do or any kind of big grandiose thing. It's when we look at the grandiose scale, or when we introduce someone to the grandiose scale through the small interaction that we have with them. When we know we're part of something bigger, and so we micro-size that to introduce somebody to the awe that we've experienced. And I remember the first time I went to Harper, it was in 2014 of December. The program was just getting started. I wasn't even the pastor here yet, but I joined SPR members, and I joined some staff, and we went over to Harper, and I ended up reading with 3 kids in the library that day, and all 3 of them had stories that, are very emotionally emotive. But one of them specifically was a little boy. He was in 3rd grade and told me that he lived with his grandparents because his parents were both in jail. And told me about living with his grandparents a little bit. And they just wanted to share things about their lives. They were interested in talking to somebody. And so told me about, how many video games he plays, multiple hours a day. Told me about how he doesn't really go anywhere outside of a house and school. And, made some comment alluding to the fact that, his shoes don't fit him anymore because they can't afford new shoes and various other things like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow, I'm so glad we're here and we can help inspire these kids. And the goal really when we started was we were going to help kids get on reading levels so that they could be better in math, better in science, they could pass the STAR test, and they could end up going to college when that might not have ever been a dream for them before. And that was kind of the goal that we started when we started at Harper. But I volunteered starting in January when I got here, and wouldn't you know, I get paired up with this same little boy. So I get paired up, and we're reading once a week in the library, and we're getting together. And at first I'm thinking, in my head, I've got the big, wide Gulf of Mexico vision. I'm like, this kid is going to Harvard, right? We're going to make him go to Harvard. And so I'm trying to help him sound out words because he's clearly not on grade reading level. And I'm like, have you discussed quantum physics yet? Because that would give you a leg up on your application. So trying to go in there, and eventually he was real quiet again, and he just started wanting to read. So we started picking out stories and simple stories. And I remember several months in, we picked out a story, and it was very similar to Top Gun. It had a lot of fighter planes in it. And we read this story, and you could see him, he was kind of getting into the story, and he was reading over my shoulder while I was reading the words and kind of helping him sound out when it was his turn to read. And at the end of the story, he looked over, and kind of for the first time, he goes, do you think I could be a pilot? And I said, sure, you got a good enough vision, you do well on your math scores, right? This is absolutely a possibility. You could be a pilot. What kind of plane do you want to fly? And he said, well, I want to fly this one with the big missiles. And I said, that sounds great too. But let's think commercial maybe, and you can go do that. But so we were, all of a sudden he could be a pilot. And so we came in a few weeks later, we were reading this book, and there was some kind of doctor figure in there. And he goes, do you think I could be a doctor? And I said, well, sure, yeah. Keep on those science grades, keep on the math grades. You can get into med school, you can go help people and heal people. And he goes, yeah, that would be really fun. I'd like to cut people open. And I was like, and sew them back together, right? Like sew them back to open. And he goes, oh, yeah, that too. And so we talked about what it meant. My brother's a doctor, so we were talking about what that was about, and all of a sudden he was like, okay, I could be a doctor. And then we read this other book, and there was some kind of president figure, and he goes, can I be the president of the United States? And I said, I'm not sure you want that job, but you could be. And you just, work hard, prepare hard, learn how to talk to people, learn how to listen to people especially. And he goes, oh, okay. And then, we started reading Harry Potter of all things, and he goes, "Can I be a wizard?" And I was like, "Sure, yeah." Then he asked me what I did. He said, "Are you a pilot?" And I said, "No, I am not a pilot." And "Are you a doctor?" I said, "No, I am not a doctor." And he goes, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, "I'm a pastor." And he goes, "What's a pastor?" I said, "Well, I lead a church." And he goes, "Well, I said, "You go to church?" And he said, "We go twice a year." And I said, "Yeah, a lot of people go twice a year." And we joked around a little bit, and he didn't get my sarcasm or humor, and just said, "Well, church is a group of people that love each other because Jesus loves them, and they try and go share that love with other people. They try and teach people about Jesus." And he goes, "Well, who's Jesus?" And I said, "Well, Jesus is this gentleman who lived in history, who we believe to be God walking around, and he helped a lot of people, and a lot of people who didn't have a lot of hope. He gave a lot of hope to them, and he lifted them out of hard situations, and he comforted them, and he shared his life with them, and ultimately he's who we believe forgives us for all the mistakes that we made." And he goes, "Could I be Jesus?" And I said, "Well, no, but," I said, but a church is of people who want to be Jesus. They want to be like that." And he goes, "That sounds good." And I thought that was never my intent of sitting in with them. And that didn't happen with most of the Harper kids. It didn't happen with most of the kids that were being mentored specifically from a faith-based aspect. But what did happen with almost every kid that we worked with math or English or whatever we worked with is that they walked in there only believing that life looked a certain way. My parents are arrested. We can't afford this. I'll never get into college. They only walked in there with that. But these signs and wonders walked into their life. The people I told you last week were miracles. The signs and wonders of Creekwood walked into their life, and they sat down improbably across from them in a library, and they started reading books about jet planes and medicine and presidents and all sorts of other adventures and experiences that these kids had never even dreamed about experiencing before, and now they can read about them on their own, and they started reading books on their own to expand a little bit of a larger pool of what their life can become because they had a sign and wonder. Now, was it a miracle? Well, ask me how easy it is to get 66 volunteers to drive from Fairview and Lucas over to Princeton on a weekly basis. Ask me how easy it is to give up time out of my busy schedule to go sit in front of a kid who really had no interest in reading from the first 3 months that we were there together. Ask me how improbable it is that he would ever dream to become the President of the United States living in Princeton, Texas with his grandparents while his parents are in jail. Sounds like a miracle to me. Because you're not only the miracle, you are the sign. You are the wonder. You have experienced something inspiring and awe-inducing. You have experienced the God who gave his Son for you so that we might be forgiven, so that we might have eternal life, so that we might have abundant life to offer. You have experienced a moment of awe, and you have shared it. And because you have shared it, there are little kids who dream bigger than they have ever dreamed before. And the bigger they dream, really, the more humble they'll become. Because the bigger their dreams are, the more they'll interact with more people. And the more people they interact with, the more awe they'll induce. And I'll tell you, the more people who can experience awe in this world, the closer to God we're all going to be. Let's pray. Gracious God, open our eyes to the awe around us, to sunsets that happen every single day and yet capture our attention, to bodies of water that have existed for millions of years and still take our breath away, and to people who give of their time to people they don't necessarily need to care about, because you have shown us that they too deserve awe. And so, God, help us to inspire the wider world as we continue to be inspired by your wider love, a love so deep that we could